Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We are so excited to have Generation O joining us today for their presentation. They're a nonprofit that's dedicated to empowering and supporting children that have been prenatally exposed to opioids. They provide caregivers and educators, healthcare workers with science-based resources. They do community connections, advocacy, and they are amazing. So we had the pleasure of meeting them in person not too long ago, and they've really touched our hearts with their passion and their mission. And so we are thrilled to welcome them today. I'm going to turn it over to Lynette. And Lynette, if you want to introduce your team and then go ahead and get right into it.
Absolutely. Um, well, we are thrilled to be here. Thank you, NADEC, for inviting us. And I love the casual atmosphere here because this can be tough stuff to talk about and tough work that we're all doing. And so any lighthearted chances are great. So let's see here. I'm just going to skip to the slide so I can introduce our team. I've seen most of our team. I don't know that for sure everyone was able to make it, but Generation O is the National Organization for Opioid Exposed Children. And we were formed by a group of caretakers that are raising these kids. And so we're seeing in our everyday life what kind of the long-term effects that they have. And we're banding together to help them because there really is little information about how to best support them throughout their childhoods. And we knew this organization needed to be formed, so we just formed it. And several are joining today. We have Andrea. She is going to speak about her child, and she's one of our founding members, also our director of marketing and creative. We have Cami, and she is going to speak of a case study with a girl with prenatal opioid exposure. Um, and she's also sorry, let me just move this here. She's also our director of strategic planning. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Technical difficulties. There you go, Eric. There's my mistake. I told you I was gonna make a mistake during this presentation.
You are all good, man. I make plenty of my history, trust me.
I'm trying to get back to where we need to be.
It might be easier to just use the cursors maybe on the keyboard if there's like a delay with the click.
Thank you.
It's worth a try.
My cursors aren't moving it though. I've popped up this box that I've never seen before. And I think that's what's causing me trouble. So, all right.
Gary, what if we unshare?
We're going to start.
And not reshare?
Yep.
That's okay. We're only on page 4.
Okay.
So we can start from here. Kim Cortez, I believe, is on the call as well. And she is our chief of staff and our programs director. And we also have, or we may have Tiffany joining us. She had a last minute emergency, so we'll find out later whether she's with us or not. But we are happy to be here, and you may be asking why we are talking about these children. We're all familiar with the opioid crisis, and we have probably also all heard about how these babies, when they're in the hospital after they're born, they have to withdraw from the drugs that the substances that their birth moms or their mothers took. Sorry, we all happen to be adoptive and foster parents, but we also have biological moms in our community. But since the opioid epidemic began in the late 90s, enough of these children have been born to fill 6 professional football stadiums. So if you can just imagine sitting in a football stadium, all the people around you, and 6 of those full of babies. This is what we call Generation O. These are the kids that are out there. They're challenged with long-term outcomes, and we're not talking about them, and we're not helping them. And so having you guys all around the country learning more about them today is really going to broaden our net and help us get the support to the families that need it. So the opioid exposure can impact their prenatal development at birth, but also throughout their childhood and even into adulthood. Studies are still going on to learn about these children since it's a relatively new occurrence, but there are adults with prenatal opioid exposure that we've spoken to, and they're struggling with things in their daily life, even today. So between stigma and gaps in the system, many of the families raising these children are left unprepared and unsupported. So the prenatal exposure is the opioids are crossing the placenta. So anything that the mom consumes, excuse me, baby is also exposed to. In today's world, the most common type of exposure during pregnancy is polysubstance exposure, meaning the baby is exposed to more than one substance. We focus on opioids, but many of the children in our homes and in the world with opioid exposure are also exposed to methamphetamines, cannabis, alcohol, caffeine, tobacco. So it's rare to have just one type of exposure. And any of this, well, the opioid exposure in particular will disrupt the brain development, both the structures of the brain and the functions of the different parts of the brain. And then in addition to that, if you can imagine the people struggling with opioid use disorder who are pregnant, there's probably a lot of other stress during their pregnancy. They may be the baby may get poor nutrition, and the baby may be experiencing the trauma that mom is experiencing. At birth, and when in the first couple of days of life, most of these babies will go through neonatal withdrawal syndrome. It's also called neonatal abstinence syndrome. So some people say NAS or NAS or NOWS. And this is what you've heard about these babies where they just cry inconsolably. They have tremors. They're very irritable and hard to soothe. And they spend time in the NICU. And all of us that will be speaking today went through this with our children, and we were told that when we took our kids home, okay, they've gone through this withdrawal, they're good to go. And what we've found as parents is that that's not necessarily the case, and that there are a lot of challenges that we need to watch out for. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that so that you can be helping us watch out for them. Excuse me. So once the babies come home and they start moving into toddlerhood, some of the things we see are emotional dysregulation. The nervous systems in these children are disrupted during the time that they're being formed in utero. And so they come out, and even with the best care, their nervous systems really struggle to regulate. And that can mean a very unhappy baby. We also see sensory processing challenges early in these children. They may be more sensitive to noise, or either more sensitive or they're craving sensitivity. So like they're craving more rough housing, they need more stimulation to their body, or they can be extra sensitive to it. They have sleeping and feeding difficulties. A lot of them have delayed milestones, and all of these things create demands for the caregiver. Anyone raising an infant has a lot of stress and demands on them, but this type of a baby really exacerbates that stress and that exhaustion that can come with parenting. as the children get older and without the early interventions that they need, and some of them, even with the early interventions, they have, we've seen a lot of attention and learning difficulties in them. Impulse control is something that we see a lot in these children, and that can lead to aggression. Some of them are very challenged socially. We see anxiety and hypervigilance, and again, that's can be brought back to the nervous system and its dysregulation. And there is a need for them to have sustained developmental support. So in our community of parents, we have been, it was created in 2017. And since that time, we're reading all the posts, we're listening to what they say, we're surveying them, and we've put together 11 different symptoms that we see over and over and over again in these children. So they're listed here, and we'll get into some of them more as we go. But not only do we see these symptoms in the children that are in our community, but each one of these symptoms individually has been linked to prenatal opioid exposure in peer-reviewed scientific studies. So next, we're going to give you some case studies of individual children and what their experience was like prenatally and what kind of a constellation of symptoms that they're seeing. So we'll start first with Andrea.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, good. I'm gonna start out talking about Owen. Owen is our youngest case study out of the three that we typically go over. Owen is based on my son. His real name is Sam. He's 3 years old. That's a stock photo. That's not really him for his privacy, but this is his constellation. So out of these 11 symptoms that are scientifically backed, we created a constellation diagram. So it's just an illustration. It's a great way for parents to be able to show and explain their child's unique needs to educators, daycare providers, even your pediatrician who may not be familiar with prenatal opioid exposure and the long-term impact. We still hear from a lot of people who think that once your baby is done with withdrawal, they're with the kid, which is totally wrong. And the other thing to keep in mind is that if your baby withdraws in the hospital and they receive a diagnosis of neonatal abstinence syndrome, meaning they went through acute withdrawal, that is an infant diagnosis, so that will not follow them into childhood. So often a lot of these things will get missed or not attributed to their prenatal opioid exposure because there is no diagnosis for this. So that's why we like looking at the visual, because it helps it all make sense and brings it together as sort of a spectrum, which we hope will eventually be a diagnosis. That's something that we are working on. So I'll tell you about Owen/Sam. He was exposed to opioids, fentanyl, heroin, methadone, cocaine, THC, and nicotine. We knew going into his adoption that he was going to be exposed to opioids and probably cigarettes. The rest of it was a surprise. We were told, you know, be prepared for whatever. And we found that out a couple days after his birth, that his birth mother underwent some testing, and we did urine, blood, and meconium on him, and were able to figure out what else he had been exposed to. He was born at 39 weeks via C-section, diagnosed with NAS after about 36 hours of life. We moved him into the specialty care unit at the hospital, where he spent 12 days in the NICU. I'm at a coffee shop. Is it really loud for you guys? I just want to make sure that that's not like drowning me out. You can hear me okay? Okay. Just wanted to make sure. They're like steaming milk and stuff, and it's really loud. So he was in the NICU for 12 days, and primarily that was due to the fact that he lost a lot of weight really quickly. He was 6 pounds, 13 ounces when he was born, and he immediately dropped down to 5 pounds. He had a uncoordinated suck, they called it. He was unable to feed, essentially. So they gave him an NG tube. We were doing tube feeds primarily, and then trying to get him to drink whatever he could orally. He struggled to finish a 2-ounce bottle in under an hour. He had fevers, he had raw open sores on his bottom that he actually had for quite a while after we went home with him. We were released at 12 days. He hadn't really improved very much. They let us go because he had gained a little bit of weight back. And they just basically were like, see ya, congratulations. No referrals to anyone. That was it. It was just good luck. No information about what to expect. So as his withdrawal symptoms dragged on into like month 5, month 6, he's still not feeding. He can't tolerate formula. We're going to GI. We're bouncing all over the place. He's extremely irritable. Just struggle on the struggle bus from day one. And, we just can't figure it out. We ended up getting connected with a NICU physician at the Children's Hospital near our home. And she was the one. I just said, can you look at him? Tell me if he's okay. Is it normal that he still has tremors? Is it normal that he's still so irritable? And she explained that, yep, it can go on for quite a while, which I wish I had known because that would have saved me a lot of worry. And she is the one who referred us to early intervention services through our school district. And that was not something that anyone told us when we were released from the NICU. I should mention, Sam was born in Ohio. So we adopted him there, brought him back to Minneapolis where I live. And so that was maybe a gap in care there that we just didn't know what to ask for or who to ask when we got back here. But that's why Geno is important, because we like to help people who are in that position. So his symptom constellation, I'll talk about really quick, is speech and language delays. Basically, all of his milestones have been delayed. Vision issues. Sam was exposed to methadone, as you can see above, and there are some scientific studies that connect the conditions strabismus and nystagmus vision conditions to methadone exposure prenatally. So Sam was diagnosed with nystagmus at age 2. He used to watch TV out of the corner of his eye, just always had his head turned. And I learned that his eyes wiggling, which I thought was a withdrawal thing that went on for several months, was actually nystagmus. So he may need surgery for that in the future, but right now we're working through glasses and patching. Developmental differences, as I mentioned, all of his milestones have been delayed. Muscle and motor diagnoses. We're actually going to a neurologist tomorrow for an evaluation for mild cerebral palsy because he is 3. He's still very off balance. He falls a lot. He needs help on the stairs. He crawls on stairs. He can't walk or support himself on the stairs. And when he runs, he has a very stiff gait. And he still has so many feeding issues, which is the next one on the list. That can also actually be a sign of mild cerebral palsy. He has trouble tolerating certain textures, sensory issues. It's all kind of interconnected. So feeding challenges are probably his number one issue. He doesn't eat anything more than like a few packaged snacks. Those are his safe foods. And we are in OT, we're in all the things. We're in all of the services now. But yeah, so those are the things that we have seen come out in the last 3 years of life. And then, so his biological mother and father made an adoption plan prior to giving birth, and he was able to leave the NICU with us. And we know now that that's actually quite rare for a substance exposed child. So I'm actually going to do the next 2 slides because Cami unfortunately had an emergency come up with her son and she had to step away too. So I will go through the next 2. Promise I'll have less to say about them because they're not my kids. Let's see. Next we have Opal. So Opal is one of the girls in our group. She is the daughter of one of our volunteers. She was exposed to buprenorphine, fentanyl, heroin, cocaine, and nicotine. She's 6 years old. She was born at 36 to 37 weeks via C-section. Did have an NAS diagnosis. I'm not sure if everyone here is aware that not every baby that's exposed to opioids gets an NAS diagnosis. Sometimes they don't exhibit, acute symptoms of withdrawal in the hospital. So if they don't get that NAS diagnosis, often that's a tricky thing to deal with down the line because people may not know that are their healthcare providers and things that they had that exposure. So she was diagnosed with NAS. She spent 10 days in the NICU. Her symptom constellation is academic difficulties. She has sleep problems, chronic nervous system dysregulation, trauma responses, ADHD and executive function difficulties. So she is in that sweet spot where she has just started school. She is 6. And that's when we hear a lot of parents in our support group say things are really, really tough. Is my kid cut out for this? They're getting sent home for behavioral problems. I'm getting a call every day. They can't, stay regulated in school. They can't focus. They're having a hard time socially. So that's when a lot of these things tend to pop out for a lot of people. Opal lived with her biological mother for the first 2.5 months, then came to her adoptive family via foster care. She had only one placement. We like to talk about the family side of things too, just because it illustrates that regardless of caregiving background, whether you've been with the same family and had that security and stability from day one, someone caring for you, getting you connected with all the right services, or you bounced around from foster home to foster home and you have that extra layer of trauma, we are still seeing the impact of the drug exposure. So a lot of people say it's hard to parse out whether these symptoms are actually coming from drug exposure or is it the trauma of the confounding factors of these kids coming from a tough background. We have a Facebook support group of 7,500 caregivers. Majority of them are foster and adoptive parents. We do have quite a few birth mothers in there too, but we're all, regardless of where these kids are being raised, seeing the same things. So we've solved for those confounding factors, we believe. So we'll move on to Odin. Odin is our last case study. He is, oh, good, you're here. Okay, I'll let Kim do it.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Go right
Hi,
ahead.
everyone. Sorry, I'm not on camera. Had to join from my phone. But Odin's case study is based on my son. He's 8 years old. He's going to be 9 soon. And I think that his is a helpful case study to illustrate some of the things that Andrea was just talking about on the last 2 slides. One is that he did not have a formal NAS diagnosis at birth. So we know from both the testing at birth and from his birth mom, what she shared, that his exposure throughout the pregnancy was extensive. He was exposed to heroin, Percocet, methadone, benzodiazepines, oxycodone, and tobacco. And he, despite that extensive exposure, didn't exhibit the acute withdrawal effects at a level that registered as a NAS diagnosis. He was, however, very premature. He was born at 28 weeks. He was in the NICU for 2 months and a day. And his constellation, even now at age almost 9, is really extensive. So he has every symptom, or has had at some point in his life, every one of the 11 symptoms except for one. So he's never had muscle or motor diagnoses. But since we made this graphic, he's been diagnosed with vision problems, which is one of the symptoms that he did not have. And when he was a baby, he did have feeding challenges. That's a symptom that he outgrew, but over the course of his lifetime, like I said, his constellation has been really extensive. Yeah, that's Odin. He struggles a lot, but he's an amazing kid.
And then Tiffany, as we mentioned, had an emergency as well, family emergency. So I will cover early intervention. I think most of you are probably familiar with early intervention. It's called different things in different states. Here in Minnesota, it's called Help Me Grow. It's run out of our school districts, and it is a great resource for these kids. It's really the best and main resource to get connected with that we recommend right off the bat. I mentioned that when I talked to the NICU pediatrician that I was able to connect with at Children's here in Minnesota, she gave me the brochure for early intervention, and I was like, "Where was this 4 months ago?" No one's told me about this. It's free service. So Sam has been in early intervention since about 6 months old, and it's so great. So they can run developmental assessments and then provide services. So they'll take a look at your child and let you know where they might be lacking, whether that's in physical milestones, speech. They've actually tried to help us a lot with Sam's feeding challenges. They have OTs on staff. They have speech therapists on staff that can help. physical therapist. Sam didn't walk until 2 weeks before his second birthday, so we had a physical therapist from Help Me Grow coming over, helping him figure out how to do that on his own for a long time. And then family education and support. These girls are like my coworkers. They're my friends. I adore them. I've been able to tell them everything. They're my number one helpers with Sam, and they're the reason I know the things that I know and can help him get what he needs, because I was clueless going into this. So I feel like I've become a sort of OT, a sort of speech therapist, a sort of PT. I've learned a lot from them, and they're wonderful. And then having that early intervention can reduce long-term challenges. Even if you feel like this child might be developing quote unquote normally in your eyes, if you know your child has substance exposure prenatally, it's just a good idea. It's free. Let them come over to your house and take a look and get to know you and your family. And then most states, once the child turns 3, they have to be tested and they qualify for special education services. And my son did qualify. So now that he's 3, going into starting a pre-K program, we have people from early intervention that know him, that have known him since he was a baby, that will follow him into his pre-K setting and work with him there, help him transition. So it's just a wonderful resource that we recommend. I don't know if you guys want to add anything, Lynette or Kim.
Thank you, Andrea. Yeah, no, early intervention is the way to go. Kim, did you have something? No. So I wasn't able to share. My kids didn't make the case studies, but these are my boys, my Y. They're currently 5 and 15. One went through early intervention because I knew to do it. The older one, however, didn't, and the trajectories that they are on in their lives are very, very different because the older one missed out on that. It kind of wasn't a thing back then when he was born. So, we just have to go from here. Obviously, some of the families raising these kids will face barriers. As adoptive parents, we realize that we are sometimes able to do things that other families can't, and we're grateful for that. But we want to be able to help every family. And so we do our best to get rid of the stigma and the blame. Depending on what state you're in, there may be a fear during pregnancy that if you disclose that you're on opioid use disorder medication, that you might have CPS involvement. And so that's a reality for a lot of these moms. Providers that you work with, there's no standardization. So because from a pediatrician standpoint, this is all, they're not learning about it in school. Some of them will have read up-to-date information, but we find that most haven't. So the pediatrician is not able to advise them on what's best for their child. They haven't learned it. And so different providers might give them different information. And that definitely creates a lot of problems within this trying to care for these kids. So Generation O is here to help. This is a picture of us at our booth at the RX Summit where we met NADEC. And we are very passionate as individuals and as an organization to educate the caregivers about what they should be looking for in their own children. Since we don't have well-trained pediatricians and other supporters that can step in and do that for us, the parents really need to be the advocates. And a lot of the things that these kids face start out very subtly, but the earlier you can intervene, the better. It's important to us that we connect families to the support that they need. One of the good things about this prenatal opioid exposure problem is that what these kids need is already out there in the communities. We're not having to invent any new therapies for these children. We just need to get them to the therapies that exist for a lot of the other kids who have different types of problems, and help people understand that there's a lot that can go on with these kids after their withdrawal in the nursery. So in our work, we're going to be advocating for national standards. And one of the ways we're going to do this is to use the settlement funding from the opioid settlement funds to establish practices, care, support for these children, and to build caregiver peer networks. So one of the things that might be able to link the affiliates that are around the country, the DEC affiliates around the country, and Generation O, is for us to work together with you to access opioid settlement funds in your own community to be able to provide some of these supports to the children that need it. Andrea mentioned that our support or our caregiver group is over 7,500. I think we're at a 7,600 now. We have about 150 people every month join. And this is the largest collection anywhere in the world raising these children. And so it's really a great resource of what people are experiencing in real time. Luckily, there are some longitudinal studies that the National Institutes of Health are doing, but these studies are going to take years to complete and to process. And so we're not willing to wait that long. We're doing what we can for these kids now. One of the programs that we're going to be launching later this year is called Thrive Points, and it will connect caregivers raising opioid exposed children with the education that they need. And they will be incentivized through a catalog of prizes that they can choose from, things like supportive toys that help their kids with some of the sensory processing needs, all different kinds of things that will help the mom and baby bond together and work through some of the issues. The caregiver will go into our portal and they'll be able to watch videos, listen to podcasts or audio recordings, read blog posts, and really learn the things that we know as parents that they need to know in order to feel confident about raising these children, and then be rewarded for doing that work. So that's another thing once we launch it later this year that we can bring to your communities. So our call to action is to recognize these kids in your work. I know that drug exposed children are the focus here, and not all children living in a home with drug use are prenatally exposed, but there's definitely going to be a proportion of them that are. And so screening them when possible and referring them to early intervention is probably the highest priority item. If they're under 3, like Andrea had said, it involves one network. And normally if they're older than 3, you're going to go through the school district, but getting them these services and helping to get those evaluations done is going to be very important. And then hopefully in the systems that you work in, you can help the parents break down any barriers so that they can better collaborate. Obviously, fighting stigma is a huge part of this. One of the reasons we use the term Generation O is that we know that these children have so many strengths. In fact, I was just watching a video of one today who's 7 years old, 6 or 7 years old, and he's learning to drive a riding lawnmower. It doesn't have blades on it, so his parents are doing it safely. But this kid, I mean, he is amazing at mowing his lawn and his neighbor's lawn, and he's having a summer making money at 6 or 7 years old. But yet he has trouble speaking. And because he doesn't sound like his peers when he speaks, he's having trouble making friends. So, the whole package, there definitely needs supports, but these kids can do amazing things. And so we want to be careful about what we call them. And so Generation O is hopefully a stigma-free way to refer to them as a group, because we do want to talk about them, because how can we help them if we're not talking about them and understanding them? And now we'll open it up for any questions and discussions anyone might have.
You're welcome to throw any of those in the chat, or you can unmute yourself to ask those questions. Thank you so much, Lynette and your team. They did have a handout that I'm putting in the chat now as well for some of their contact information.
It looks like Jill has her hand up. So Jill, go ahead.
I'm so excited. Like, this was such a fabulous presentation. I'm a pediatrician and I took care of a ton of opiate exposed babies in the hospital setting. So it's really refreshing to hear from parents that raise these children to know what the outcomes are. There's so much data and so much articles that are out there, research articles, but I really love to hear the stories. Like, that makes it so much more rich and so much more personal. I'm going around talking to doctors' offices and really, and especially family practice offices that haven't heard about the outcomes, and like to get them into the eye doctors early and all that kind of stuff. So your information is definitely important to get out there. And I'm so thankful that you're a resource for so many families. I was wondering if you guys know of any articles out there about, since they're now so old, since the 1990s, that these kids are now adults, about future drug use in this population. I would imagine it's fairly high, but that's just a guess. I'm wondering if you have any scientific or science-based findings or articles that I could rely on. Thank you.
Lynette, you look a little frozen, but oh, darn, she's frozen. We we do have some. Oh, you're there.
And that doesn't mean you're not out there. I mean, I try really hard to mine the data. And can you hear me? Am I
You're
okay?
a little breaking up a little.
Okay. I haven't seen any data that's specific to this population, but I know that the data that's out there, the older data, which you probably know too, that just the trauma exposure and the drug exposure in general is going to make them higher risk in that area. I'm waiting for some of it to come out because I'd like to be able, I think that's one more thing to show, you know, why we need to band together and help these kids. But no, I haven't seen any.
I did cite something in an article that I wrote recently for Sleep Review Journal. It's a sleep disorders industry publication that referred to the frequency of substance use in kids who were prenatally exposed. I don't know how, you know, drilled down it was, but I'll try to find it and then we'll have them send it over to you. I can pull it. I just have to dig for it.
Thank you for the work you're doing. As you
Yes.
know, there's not enough pediatricians and family medicine doctors that understand. So that's wonderful that you're able to do that.
Yeah, and these kids are 100% falling through the cracks because they don't know what they don't know, the physicians. And even pediatricians haven't received the training. Like you had mentioned that we don't get the training, and we really didn't. I dug in because I was caring for these kids and it was impactful to my practice. But until you follow them long term, you really don't know what you're missing. And especially pediatricians are closing off to, you know, Medicaid-based populations. And I think those are definitely the kids that fall in there. So they're getting followed up by PAs and nurse practitioners who maybe have even a fraction of the training as physicians do.
Well, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions at all? I don't see any.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm wondering in what ways specifically are some of the opioid settlement funds being used to help these kids, because we are using them in ways we're in substance use disorder prevention. So there are two of us for a county of about 50,000. And we are using some of those funds to educate, to do some Narcan distribution, that kind of thing. And I'm wondering specifically, as we try to maybe tie this in with our Drug Endangered Children's Alliance, what specific ways that communities are using those funds?
Well, unfortunately, communities are not using these funds for the children. Um, we have thrown out a pledge that we are trying to get to the different attorneys generals in all the states to reserve 10% of the funds for these children. Whether that takes or not, the children are definitely in need of this money, and their families. We have proposed a couple of different ways to use it, but we have not yet been picked up by any fund. We have a colleague in East Tennessee, and she proposed to have almost like a healthcare card where there was a certain amount of money on that could be used by the caregiver for the therapies that insurance doesn't cover. Because a lot of the things that these kids need, like the vision therapy or the infant reflex therapy, are not standard things covered by Medicaid or other insurances. And in East Tennessee, where she is, any foster child has an access to an account like this and gets a certain amount of money that the foster parent can spend on medical services that aren't covered by insurance. And so she was hoping that, hey, let's try this out as a pilot for opioid exposed kids. Tennessee did not accept that offer when it was proposed to their settlement council. But we're trying. We're making proposals in different states. We've proposed the Thrive Points program that I mentioned in the presentation, and we have different ideas of ways to use it. It's just a matter of, I think, most boards determining how to spend this money don't even know that these kids exist and that they need support. So a lot of it is awareness. But then if there is awareness and if they are interested in helping these kids, we can train the caregivers. We can, get the caregivers matched with funds to help them with the things that these kids need for their unique needs. And there's several other ideas that we've put together, but we're still at the baby steps of that movement. Hopefully, when we can get one or two states on board, we can kind of, show the other states what these states are doing and take off.
Yes, thank you. We're in Michigan, and the committee that we work with is a county committee, and so we access county funds through that. And as our Drug Endangered Children's Alliance moves forward, I mean, I'm out here in the future because we're still trying to get buy-in from different agencies, but I'm just thinking about that because I imagine it's a widespread issue. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, we want to thank you for your presentation and for your time and everything that you are out there doing. Jill, hey, Jill, somebody put something in the chat for you. There's a study that's put in the chat. So I'm like multitasking here. But their contact card is in the chat. So please, before you leave, make sure you go in there and download that and save that. They're an excellent resource, and we can tell you from the national level, they're super responsive. We've worked with them and stuff. So please make sure that you take their card. So any final things, any final thoughts, Lynette, or anything that you wanted to share?
I'll just let you know that on that contact card is a QR code for our Facebook support group that we mentioned. And if you do come across caregivers that are raising opioid exposed children, they are likely feeling very alone because of the challenges that these kids have. And allowing them to be connected to our online group really provides so much comfort and support that they may not be able to find anywhere else. So please pass that along to any of the caregivers that you know who have these kids. And thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing all this important information. And thank you everybody for joining us today. We know you guys have busy schedules, but to come and to learn more and to make sure we're pushing forward the mission and helping these kids, it's so important. So thank you so much.